Welcome to the Agoura Hills Planning Commission meeting of May 21st, 2026. At this time, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. If you wish to speak or submit a written comment, please complete a comment card for each agenda item and submit it to the city clerk before the public comment portion of that item. I now call the meeting to order, and I will defer to Commissioner Sharon, Vice Chair Sharon. Apologies for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, if everyone could please stand. Right hand over your heart, ready, begin.
Thank you. And I will defer to the city clerk for roll call.
Thank you. Good evening. Commissioner Platzer?
Present.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Stein?
Present.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Here.
Chair Reinhardt?
Here.
Chair Reinhardt, you have a quorum.
Perfect, thank you. And seeing we have no excused absences, I will skip along and move along to the approval of the agenda. Will the makers of the motion and a second to approve the agenda please state your names?
Commissioner Roth makes a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Vice Chair Sharon, seconds.
Thank you. I will defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. We will now move to the public comment section of the agenda. This section is reserved for individuals wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. If you have materials to distribute to the Commission, please do not approach the dais. Instead, provide them to the city clerk for distribution on your behalf. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Written comments submitted by individuals may not be read aloud by another speaker. Individuals addressing the Commission shall refrain from disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comment.
Thank you. No written correspondence or public speaker cards were received.
Perfect, thank you. The next item on the agenda is public hearing, item number 1. Our next item is to conduct a public hearing to consider the adoption of a resolution approving a conditional use permit and site plan architectural review permit to allow for first and second story additions to an existing single-family dwelling on a hillside lot within a significant ecological area and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Associate Planner Eric Wong.
Thank you, Chair Reinhardt and members of the Planning Commission. Good evening. The item before you this evening is a request for first and second story additions to an existing 2-story single-family dwelling on a hillside lot located within the significant ecological area. So for this evening's agenda, we're going to go over the existing conditions on the site, the proposed project itself, the site plan of the proposed project, CEQA considerations, and staff recommendation. Starting with existing conditions, the project site is located within the very low density residential district, also known as the RV district, in addition to the Old Agoura and equestrian overlays. In addition, the part of the site is also located within the Palo Quemado significant ecological area. The average slope on the site is around 34%, mainly being comprised of the major slope on the eastern portion of the site. Both the significant ecological area and average slope require a conditional use permit to be warranted for the scope of the project, as the project proposes over 700 square feet of additions. The additions are going to go onto an existing 2-story single-family residential dwelling that includes 3,095 square feet of area, which includes a 600 square foot attached garage. The floor area ratio, when including the garage exemption, only accounts to 2,495 square feet out of the calculated 4,461 square foot maximum. Existing setbacks for the single-family residential dwelling include over 100 foot from the front and rear side yard, or front and rear yards, and then for the side yards, 46 feet and 48 feet. This totals to an existing 6.6 approximate percent site coverage. Within its vicinity to the direct east is county lands, specifically conservancy-owned land, and to the direct south and to the west are similarly zoned parcels within, again, the RV District OAEQ overlays. Across to the north from Blythedale Road is open space restricted zone property, also known as OSR, within the same overlays as well. On site itself are multiple protected trees. However, the project would not encroach upon any of the existing ones. Therefore, there's no requirement for a protected tree permit for this project. So here are some site photographs of the existing single-family residential dwelling. As you can see from the front, there is a balcony on the second floor. And to the side, this is the side from the southern yard, which will be expanded upon with the first-story addition. And this is a shot of the rear. As you can see, near the top of the roof, there's a roof-mounted HVAC unit. As part of the project, this will be relocated to the rear yard to be in compliance with our current code. Again, the proposed project is a first floor and second floor addition and remodel. The first floor will expand the footprint by 596 square feet for the kitchen and foyer, with a partial conversion of the existing 600 square foot garage to habitable area. The second floor will be also expanded upon its existing balcony, so that only includes 329 square feet. But there's no expansion of the footprint from the second story. And once again, the HVAC is being relocated from the roof to the rear yard, which will also avoid the oak tree protection zone to the exact north of it. As you can see on this slide with the site plan, the HVAC was purposely put in the rear yard to avoid that protected tree to direct north. As summarized here in the slide and in your staff report, the project as proposed would comply with all of the applicable municipal code standards. And concerning CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act, staff believes that this project is exempt via a Class 1 categorical exemption, and this is because the project itself increases the square footage less than 50% of the original floor area and under 2,500 square feet, while the project itself is within or partially within the Palo Quemado significant ecological area. The footprint of the construction is located away from the SEA. In fact, it is located within a relatively flat, frequently disturbed surface. Therefore, the project doesn't disturb any previously undisturbed soils or slopes. And because of that, the project doesn't meet the exemption exception as outlined in section 15300.2 of state secret guidelines, including subsection C, which concerns unusual circumstances that would have significant effect on the environment. Therefore, staff respectfully recommends the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit number PZ 2025-159 CUP and site plan architectural review permit number PZ 2026-36 SPR to allow construction of first and second story additions to a two-story single-family dwelling on a hillside lot within a significant ecological area and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. That staff presentation is over and staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Does any commissioner have any questions of staff? I will start to my left with Commissioner Stein.
None.
Do we have to
Commissioner
say
Clausen.
disclosures?
Oh, yes. No, I'm sorry, that's the second part.
Okay.
So you have no questions of staff?
Yeah, I do have a question. I went there and I couldn't get up onto the property, so I don't know what is going up there, but the road is privately owned that is alongside that property?
So yeah, it is a sort of like a flag lot. So there is that entrance from Blythedale, but the throat is pretty long and stretches in behind the, if we can go back here, I'll show you. As you can see, there's like that long stretch of blue on the north. That's the driveway, and it leads to the actual property.
No, my question is, there's a private or public road that, that services all those houses.
Blythedale Road,
Yes.
it's private.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Commissioner Roth.
Thank you very much. I will ask this of the applicant, if one of these folks with us tonight is the applicant, but curious to know any communications with neighbors, the Old Agoura homeowners group, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll defer that to applicant Clay. He's actually here this
Okay,
evening.
perfect. All right, thank you. I'll reserve the rest of my questions for the applicant.
Vice Chair Sharon.
Those are my questions too, so we'll move on.
I will also defer to the applicant and then maybe follow up. Okay, so does any commissioner have any ex parte communications to disclose at this time?
I did drive by the property and did speak with staff.
I drove by the property but didn't enter the property.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I will now defer to the applicant. You and your representatives will have a total of 15 minutes for your presentation. Please adjust the microphone and watch for the red light on the podium. When you see the yellow light, you will have 1 minute to wrap up your comments.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
My name is Clay Wolflick. Nice to meet you all. My uncle is the architect going through a bunch of health issues, so he can't be here tonight, but I'm here. I'm close to all of our neighbors. They know about it. It's a cool sense of community. Everyone's done a bit of kind of add-ons or construction, you know what I mean, in their time at those houses. And so it's a pretty loving, I've kind of lucked out with where we're at to answer that question, so.
Okay, so you don't have any additional comments or anything? Okay, so I will then, before we move on to public comments, does any commissioner have any questions of the applicant? And I'm going to start on this side.
Yeah, I mean, I think you addressed it, appreciate it. You know, we know that there's a lot of sensitivity in the Old Agoura community around development and buildings and looks and feels, and so we just wanted to ensure, I feel like it's a consistent question every time something comes up from Old Agoura on making sure the neighbors know, and I know we can't call it a HOA, but the homeowners group, et cetera. And so appreciate your response there. My question, you know, again, would be, you know, if you've worked with them, particularly the group, we typically get letters from them. To me, it's not a deal breaker because of, I think, the nature of the project, but just curious to know what communications you've had.
Yeah, so this is actually phase 2 of this project. We just completed an ADU in the 800 square feet in the fall. So yes, like even from the jump, our neighbors have known, hey, we're building this ADU and then we're gonna redo our house. So it's been kind of an ongoing conversation.
Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Sharon.
I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Those are pretty much my questions as well. I just want to know what the community's kind of feedback, your neighbors, the HOA, that kind of stuff. But it sounds like you've been working on the house for a bit of time. And so I don't have any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Stein?
Yeah, so first of all, I do appreciate every homeowner, whether Old Agoura or Agoura, that wants to spend money and improve their homes because it benefits the city. So you mentioned you just completed an additional ADU on your property. Did you have any issues at all that came up? I'm just curious in terms of disturbance to the property or anything.
No, we didn't. I'll tell you what, the one thing that we did that I wish, we did not pull a soils report for the foundation on that, thinking that we would hit bedrock. It was my uncle's kind of recommendation, thinking we would hit bedrock in the, like, given distance down, and we didn't, so we had to go back to the city. So that was a bit of a headache. We did a soils report this time around for that reason on the main house, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Potzer?
Hi, I appreciate you coming here. How far is the ADU from the house?
It's pretty far. The property is 2.5 acres or 2.26 acres. It's like maybe half a football field away.
And are there any inhabitants there, any people living there?
So ever since COVID hit, my wife and I both work from home when we're not filming out in the field. And so for that reason, before we built this ADU, my wife was working out of our closet in our bedroom, which is funny and had like a virtual background deal. And then I worked out of my son's room. So that ADU is used for office space for us. So we spend 10 hours a day each in that spot, but no one's living there. No, we have guests and family come. We're like very family oriented and we're kind of the hub of the family with our kids. And so people are there quite frequently, but not on a extended basis.
And the attached JDU, what are your plans regarding that?
The garage,
Garage, yes.
the garage, we want to make it like there's so much parking there at the house, and we're not big car people, meaning we don't care about fancy cars or keeping them pristine like that. We're gonna make it like a playroom for the kids, like ping pong, have a TV in there where we can watch games, that kind of deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here, and your property sounds very cool. And your uncle lived there for a while before you moved onto the property, or?
Oh, no, my uncle is the architect.
Oh, okay.
He's the architect on it. So, no, a nice family that moved out of the state was there before us,
Oh,
so.
okay. Well, that's cool that your uncle's an architect. That's a good connection to have in family, so.
My uncle's the architect and my mom is the contractor, so it all kind of,
Wow.
it's a family, it's a
Family
family affair.
business.
Yeah.
Family business. Well, as someone who works remotely, I am very envious of your ADU, so I understand the getting creative with locations and virtual backgrounds. I was in space today, so.
Right? Yeah. Do what you got to do, but yeah.
So when you looked at, one of the things I appreciated about your, proposed expansion was that you really did try to work within the original footprint of the house. And I think that that's a smart way to go as far as growth, because it does make it a lot easier to, or palatable, I guess, if neighbors are concerned about, a giant McMansion going in or something like that. And it sounds like, I mean, I did not have a chance to drive into your neighborhood, so I didn't get to see if you're set way back from your property line or if your home is, visible.
We are set quite a bit back, and even with this addition, I'd go as far as saying we're close to the smallest house on the street, probably. Still.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, it's gotten tonier back there since I was a kid, so.
It has.
Yeah.
It has. But yeah, just quickly, don't want to waste anyone's time. The main thing is it's a galley kitchen in the back, and we want like an open concept kitchen. So that's kind of the impetus of this whole remodel.
Started with the kitchen, and then
we're like, you know what? Yeah, exactly. So
like any good homeowner project, it expanded rapidly, so.
it did.
Okay, great. I don't have any additional questions. It seems pretty straightforward. So again, I'll just ask if anyone has any follow-ups before moving on. Okay. So, sorry, I lost my place here. Okay, any questions? Okay, I will now defer to the city clerk for any public comments. If you have something, I'm sorry. Now that we've done questions, you may be seated. I apologize, I'm under-caffeinated this evening. I will now defer to the city clerk for any public comments. If you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please hand it to our city clerk. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Written comments submitted by individuals may not be read aloud by another speaker.
Thank you. We did not receive any written correspondence, nor do we have any speaker cards.
Thank you. Okay. I will now, if you had a rebuttal, which I don't think that you do, but I won't presume, you have 5 minutes if you want to respond to anything that was asked or commented on. Okay. Great, thank you. Okay. Before closing the public hearing, does any commissioner have any further questions of applicant or staff? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. All right. There being no further questions, I will now close the public hearing. And we will now move on to deliberations for public hearing item number 1. I will start with Commissioner Stein.
After hearing the staff report, hearing from the applicant, just the nature of the size of the property, its location, and working with your neighbors, I just feel like it's part of the community, so I can definitely find all the findings and approve the resolution.
Okay. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to go to Commissioner Roth now.
I have some concerns because I didn't hear that the Lakers or the Dodgers were going to be on in the garage. So as long, no, I'm kidding. Really appreciate you being here. I think it's very valuable to, as Commissioner Stein mentioned, increasing the living space and the quality of life that you have at your home. I've done it a few times myself and have kids, so totally there with you. I can make all the findings. Really appreciate your communication with your neighbors. I didn't have a chance to go look at the property. I did go on Google Earth though, and you could, to your point about the size and scale of and the scope of other homes in the immediate vicinity, there are some pretty big ones there. So I don't think that this is anything flagrant, and that was a Lakers or basketball pun, but anything flagrant in terms of what your neighbors would think you all would be doing. So I can make all the findings and appreciate you being with us tonight. And sorry it's so short to get all the way to this point in time and be like 10 minutes in and out, but thank you for going and working with the staff through this whole process.
Thank you. Commissioner Platzer?
Yes, I appreciate that you're here. I'm an Old Agoura resident since 1981. So any improvement and to my community, I concur. I appreciate it, and also I appreciate that you increased the equestrian area as well. Correct? Right. And the Old Agoura Homeowners Association and the neighbors are all in agreement with you, right? So, okay. So it meets all the requirements, and I, again, can approve it, and I concur with my fellow commissioners.
So you would make all the findings?
I make all the findings.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Sharon?
Thank you for being with us tonight. I am going to echo my fellow planning commissioners. It's always good to see residents investing in their homes because it improves your house specifically, but it actually improves our entire community as well. So I too can make all the findings, and I wish you an easy construction and expansion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sharon. And I will also echo my fellow planning commissioners, thoughts, and do appreciate you being here and going through procedure. The process can be, time-consuming and difficult, but I know that staff does an excellent job of trying to make it as seamless as possible, for residents and homeowners, and again, to be thoughtful about how you expand. And it sounds like your house is a really great place to hang out. I'm currently traumatized from sports because my Buffalo Sabres lost in the playoffs, so I will just leave that there. But I know it's Buffalo. I was waiting for that, but you can move when you're a kid and still root for the team. So I too can make all the findings and appreciate you being here. Okay, so with that, I will now defer to our Assistant City Attorney to read aloud the staff recommendation below.
So the staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Agoura Hills, California, approving conditional use permit case number PZ-2025-159-CUP and site plan architectural review permit case number PZ-2026-36-SPR to allow construction of first and second story additions to a two-story single-family dwelling on a hillside lot within a significant ecological area, and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of the resolution.
Thank you. I will now call for a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, Commissioner Roth, so moved.
Vice President Vice Chair. Oops.
We all need caffeine tonight.
Yeah, Sharon, seconds.
Thank you. I will now defer to the city clerk for roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer,
Aye.
Commissioner Roth,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. I will now defer to Community Development Director Robbie Nesevic.
The decision of the Planning Commission shall be final within 15 days from the date of the decision unless an appeal has been filed with the City Council.
Great, thank you. You are all set, thank you. Public hearing item number 2 is our next item, which is to conduct a public hearing to consider the adoption of a resolution to approve wireless telecommunication facility conditional use permit case number WIRE-2025-0014 to replace, relocate, and install antennas and related equipment on an existing commercial building. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Associate Planner Katrina Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Reinhardt, and good evening, Planning Commissioners. Today's item is for a modification of an existing wireless telecommunications facility for T-Mobile. So tonight, I'll go over a brief history of the wireless site, the location and vicinity, existing conditions, and I'll go into the project scope and specifically discuss the antennas, equipment, concealment efforts, noise and RF emissions, and the coverage area, and then I'll go over staff's recommendation. So in 1996, Pacific Bell Mobile Services established the building as a legal base station for a wireless telecommunications facility where they installed roof-mounted antennas and equipment. The Pacific Bell Mobile Services site went through a name change and acquisitions, and around 2012 became known as what is currently known as T-Mobile West LLC. In 2006, a separate carrier called Metro PCS co-located on the site and installed ground-mounted equipment and flush wall-mounted antennas. Eventually, Metro PCS was acquired by T-Mobile, and all antennas and equipment came under their ownership. In 2015, T-Mobile modified the site under an eligible facilities request, which was a streamlining process established by Section 6409A of the 2012 Spectrum Act. Essentially, it requires local jurisdictions to approve wireless facility modifications, provided the changes don't substantially change the physical dimensions of the existing tower or base station. Then in 2020, the carrier tried to apply for a modification under an eligible facilities request, but staff determined that unpermitted modifications occurred after the 2015 permit. Because of those changes, the site became out of compliance and no longer qualified under an EFR. Since 2020, T-Mobile, through their consultants, have worked with the city to try and become compliant. Since they no longer qualified for an EFR, staff advised them to apply for a conditional use permit. The project before you today is a CUP to bring the site into full compliance. Because this location is already established as part of the wireless network infrastructure, the scope of today's review focuses on the site's design, screening, and development standards rather than reevaluating the use of the property. So the existing site is located on a building at the end of a cul-de-sac within the business park office retail zone and within the freeway corridor overlay. It's directly south of the 101 freeway and adjacent to office buildings on the west and vacant lots on the southeast, all of which are zoned residential medium density within the affordable housing overlay. The base station, or the building that the wireless facility is located on, is the rooftop of a 3-story commercial building. The existing equipment is located in the center of the roof and shielded by the parapet of the mansard roof. The existing antennas are located above the parapet and mounted on the west side of the roof, located here, and the wall-mounted antennas are located on the east side of the building, which cannot be seen on this image. So here's another perspective of the current roof-mounted antennas that rise about 6 feet above the parapet and are visible from the freeway. Keep in mind that in 1996, the city didn't have an adopted ordinance to regulate wireless infrastructure and design, so it was permitted to be unconcealed at that time. So before I delve into the details of the project scope, I wanted to briefly explain antenna sectors. On the site, there are currently three sectors. We have A, B, and C, and each sector faces a different azimuth relative to true north. They are positioned in a way to maximize cellular coverage, which we'll look at towards the end of this presentation. In this image, it shows a layout of the proposed antennas. On the top left corner, in the purple box right here, is where antennas for sector A and C will be located, and will be located in the enclosure. On the bottom right corner, in the blue box, the enclosure for sector B antennas will be located. The larger green box here is one of their equipment cabinets, and the smaller green box is the parapet-mounted equipment. Since the ancillary equipment are set lower than the parapet walls, no enclosure is required, since they won't be visible anyway. The only equipment that may be visible and cannot be housed in an enclosure is the GPS antenna, which is approximately 12 inches above the parapet and less than the 18 inches that the code allows for projections. In these next two slides, I'll go over the antenna details in each sector. So here is sector A and C, which is on the west or northwest elevation. There are 4 antennas that are currently installed in a popsicle-like design, where the support posts are attached to the parapet walls, and the actual antennas and corresponding RRUs, or remote radio units, are attached to the top of the support posts. There are 4 antennas between sectors A and C, so they each have 2. In each sector, 1 antenna will be removed and the other will be retained and relocated to the northwest corner of the rooftop. In addition to the relocated antennas, 2 new antennas for each sector will also be installed. As a result, all 4 antennas and their respective remote radio units will still be above the parapet, but will now be fully housed in an enclosure. And I can try and zoom in there so you can take a closer look at it. So we have sector A here and sector C in this corner. Sector B is currently located on the east elevation of the building and are flush mounted to the exterior wall. Although they don't sit above the building, they can still be visible from the street because they're not fully screened other than being painted to match the building color. In this sector, the applicant proposes to remove 3 separate RRUs, remove 2 antennas, and relocate 1 antenna to the northeast rooftop. Similar to sectors A and C, sector B will be fully housed in an enclosure with a relocated antenna and 1 new antenna in its respective RRUs. Both enclosures will be approximately 6 feet above the parapet, and will be composed of fiber reinforced plastic or FRP that are made to mimic the existing design of the building. So here are the renderings of the proposed enclosures designed to act like cupolas and serve as an architectural feature of the building by mimicking its color, roof style, and windows. All features of the enclosure will be made of fiber reinforced plastic to ensure the antennas are still functional. FRPs are typically used for these types of projects because it doesn't interfere with radio frequency transmissions. I can zoom into those renderings. Closer look. As I mentioned earlier, the antennas and ancillary equipment will also be located on the rooftop, but are shielded from view by the existing parapet. At the center of the roof, the existing cabinet will be replaced by 2 new cabinets, which will house cooling fans and other electrical equipment that help power the antennas. Along the southern side of the rooftop, a new service light will be attached to the parapet and will include a visor to ensure illumination is pointed downward and prevents spillover. The new GPS antenna will also be attached to the southern parapet wall and will sit 12 inches above the parapet. In comparison to the size of the building, the GPS antenna will barely be visible above the roof. Lastly, in addition to the equipment and antennas, all cables will be housed in cable trays to consolidate all the electrical connections and prevent hazards on the rooftop. As is typical for many wireless facilities, there is potential noise emissions. So for this project, the equipment cabinet will emit noise specifically from the cooling fans. So the higher the temperature and pressure, the higher the sound pressure. For this equipment, the noise study found that the highest sound pressure will be 68 decibels, but will dissipate to 19 decibels at the nearest property line. The city's code requires that noise emissions do not exceed 55 decibels at all property lines, which means the project complies with the requirement. In addition to noise emissions, the project will also emit radio frequency. Since the city can't regulate RF emissions, the FCC established mitigation standards to limit human exposure, which includes barriers, paint striping, locking mechanisms, and various types of signage. The project is located on a rooftop of a commercial building which already has restricted access. And on top of that, the project will include notices that alert anyone in the vicinity of the antennas of potential exposure. Most of the antennas are facing in a direction that does not have pedestrian access, with the exception of one of the Sector C's antennas, where there is potential for a person to unknowingly walk in front of the antenna. To prevent this from happening, the project proposes to paint a portion of that area a bright color, essentially striping it to alert anyone on the roof. Also, as required by FCC standards, the project proposes various signage on the rooftop that range from general guidelines to warning signs. Prior to operating the antennas for use, the site will be inspected to ensure all measures to control access are in place. Can zoom in so you can take a look at where the Sector C antennas are. So you have Sector C antenna here, and there's a paint striping in this corner, which probably still can't see it, but we can talk about that later. By upgrading the site, the applicant proposes an increase in cellular coverage for T-Mobile users, and this can be seen by comparing these two exhibits. So on the left is a site without the proposed antennas. Currently, there is minimal coverage along the 101 freeway and parts of Old Agoura. With the proposed antennas on the right, there will be an improvement in coverage in those areas. And before I conclude my presentation, I just wanted to add or recommend a condition to be included. I won't read the whole thing, but I can present it and read it during questions. And so with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve wireless telecommunications facilities conditional use permit case number wire-2025-0014, subject to conditions of approval as amended, and based on the findings of the attached draft resolution, and make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. And this concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions, and our consultant for our wireless telecommunications is also available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katrina. Appreciate it. Does any commissioner have any questions of staff at this time? I will start to my left. Commissioner Stein?
Yes, part of it is just, I understand having, antennas on the roof. It was a little disheartening to hear that there was a lot of it in compliance in the beginning. How do we make sure that 5 years, 10 years from now, that they stay compliant with the FCC rules? I mean, obviously we didn't catch it. Is there a mechanism, or is it just now relying on trust?
So I would say that upon completion of construction, we would do a final inspection, make sure that they are compliant with all regulations, and then if they ever modified it in the future, just like what happened in this scenario, we would essentially monitor and make sure that they are meeting all requirements at that time.
And then the other question really is, they're going to be building that cover out of plastic. I mean, is that going to wear well? I mean, are we going to be able to all of a sudden be able to see that it's broken down? I mean, I just, from an aesthetic standpoint, that's all I'm really concerned about is there going to be more wear and tear, or are they going to have to make sure that it's updated, maintained properly, going forward?
Yes, they would have to maintain it.
I'll defer any other questions to the applicant.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Platzer?
Yes, my concern was the non-compliance, but you answered it. Also, the 47 feet antenna, where does it start? at the bottom of the property, or does it start at the second story?
So the 47 feet is the measurement from the finished grade of the building to the top of the antenna. The antenna is only 6 feet above the parapet. So what the measurement includes is the building plus the antenna.
Okay, and also, is it visible on the, basically, the street is a dead end, so is it visible from the freeway?
They'll be housed in enclosures, so they won't be visible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Thank you very much. I have a few questions related to, actually, first I'll start with the compliance issue. Was it T-Mobile specifically who was out of compliance, or was it the owner of the building? Because obviously, there's another owner. The property is owned by someone else, but T-Mobile has the right to install the antennas, et cetera, on top of the building. So who was out of compliance specifically?
It would be the carrier.
The carrier? And then what were specifically again, what were they out of compliance on?
There were different equipment and antennas that were installed so we did a delta between what was approved in 2015 and what they tried to submit in 2020, and there was a noticeable difference that wasn't accounted for between those times. So we made a determination that it's out of compliance, and the way to bring it to compliance is to go through a conditional use permit.
So is it the conditional use permit? That is not what is subject to us tonight. That happened prior, correct?
Well, tonight is a conditional use
Okay.
permit.
And so has it been operational all this time?
I'll defer that to the applicant.
Okay. And then do we, as a city, obviously the lack of compliance over time, I think is a concern. I'm going to have some questions about the EME report as well. But curious to know what kind of tax revenue, et cetera, it results in the application, of the facility or any improvement to the facility to the city budget.
I'm not sure. I don't know if Robbie has an answer for that.
I don't believe it does.
Okay. Have we heard anything from the tenants of the building? Because I know the applicant here, there's two folks in the room, so I'm not sure if one gentleman might be, one of the two gentlemen here might be the property owner, but this will relay directly to my EME question here in a second, but I'm curious to know if there's been any communication with the tenants who are occupying the building today, as well as neighboring buildings.
From what I know, there was no communication with the tenants of the building. We have had conversations with the property owner. They are aware of the project because they signed onto it when they signed the application, essentially authorizing T-Mobile and their consultants to acquire any kind of land use entitlement to modify the site.
Got it. Related to the EME, I'm going to pull up what I have here in terms of the compliance. To me, obviously the compliance at the site level on the roof, it states something to the effect of the EME, and forgive me, I'm not a specialist in, we've never actually, this is our first cell as a commission, this current group of commissioners, so bear with me. But in the executive report at the end, if I'm not mistaken, it says something to the effect of like nearly, the EME levels would be at 18,000 or 1,800% of what's federally recognized. Though on the ground floor, it's 80%. So my chief concern is that we're not hearing from the tenants of the building that's occupied currently. There's a massive delta between what's happening at the top and what happens at the bottom. And so I'm curious to know what happens in the middle, where there's actually people occupying that building and working in that building.
I'll defer that to our applicant.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? Oh,
Nope.
okay.
I'll
thank
refrain.
you. Vice Chair Sharon?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. All right, so I actually had a few, I was on the same thought path as Commissioner Roth. I'm curious about what else is, if is it just T-Mobile that's occupying that building, or is there like tenants?
On the rooftop, it's just T-Mobile. As far as tenants in the building, I believe there are existing tenants in the building.
Okay, and then what is the radius of like RF emissions? Like, is it like 5 feet or is it like 50 feet?
I'll defer that to our consultant.
Okay.
Good evening, Planning
I-
Commissioners. Good evening. It's not a radius per se. The antennas emit as if it's a flashlight, directional beams forward. And the reason that we look at the rooftop as well as ground level is because the general population generally are on the ground level, but rooftops are also accessible by general population such as HVAC workers, as well as roofers or tile workers. That's why we look at the right in front of the antennas that the beams are shooting outwards. They don't have side lobes or back lobes as much. They just directional patterns forward right in front of the antennas.
Okay, so they're housed on top of the building, and so you're saying that it kind of is like a beam around there, but is that what you're saying?
It's not a beam around it. It emits directly from the antenna. So if this is the panel antenna, it's shooting outwards directionally like a flashlight, and it's not dissipating on the sides.
Okay. So what is the emissions impact on people 1 story below the roof?
Not any emission impact on the below the roof because the antennas emit outwards directionally, and there's no downward tilt specifically on those antennas because we look at the azimuth of the antennas as well as the tilt of the antennas, and those are 90-degree tilts directly on the rooftop emitting outwards.
Understood. Okay, so forgive me, like the only, you know, I've heard of like people like in cell towers being like constructed like within spitting distance of like elementary schools, and people being concerned of the radiation impact on their children. So is there no radiation impact on anyone that's occupying the building, just technically anyone that's on the rooftop?
Yes, but not all locations on the rooftop. Specifically, Sector A in this instant and Sector B are situated all the way on the corner of the rooftops, right at the edge of the parapet emitting outwards where there's no accessibility for people to stand on that area. Sector C has a slight area which we have looked into that has some controlled access zone created by Sector C, which we have recommended the mitigation measures to make sure we have the radio frequency barrier paint striping and the RF caution signage to make sure that nobody enters that zone without previously like reducing the emissions or shutting off the emissions if that area needs to work.
Okay, so the antennas are not like a 360 admission.
No, those are directional panel antennas. There are some types of antennas which is not related to this project. They're called WIP omnidirectional antennas, but the antennas that we're dealing tonight is directional panel antennas.
Understood. So only people on the roof within the admission zones, I guess you could say, like in the direction of the admissions, are technically in some sort of admission, like danger zone-ish.
It's not a danger zone per se. It's called the controlled access zone, or the acronym is CAZ. Basically, that's the area that people need to prevent from entering.
Okay.
And that area that is only accessible within this entire rooftop is that small. Can you zoom in to where the paint striping is? So
Yeah, I didn't see where the paint striping is, but I understand. It's like a...
it's a little area that the Sector C direction azimuth is hitting a small portion that is accessible by people. So that's why the paint striping the entire area is like paint stripes so that we can prevent people from entering that area.
Understood. And then I also noticed on this figure doesn't have a label, but I'm looking at this one. Yeah, I don't, it's just a map of it, of the parking lot of the building and of the neighboring building. So Sector A and C are very close to the neighboring building. Is there any emissions or radiation impact on the people if they were on the rooftop of the next neighboring building?
That's a really good question. The answer is no. Reason for two reasons. Number one, the adjacent building is lower in topography than the current location of the center line of those antennas. And number two, when we calculated the controlled access zone, which is a specific calculation based on the emissions that are proposed, the controlled zone does not reach out to the adjacent property.
Okay, and then, okay, so the zone doesn't, so you're saying like the section that the antenna points to and at the height, it doesn't interfere with the other building?
The strength of the emissions that are within the radio frequency report, when we use those strengths and calculate what we come up with a controlled access zone, the number of feet that is dissipating is less than the adjacent building.
Okay. So it's the frequency is dissipating. Is it dissipating to zero?
It eventually does, but it's the inverse square law that when you're closer to the antenna, it's high, but one distance away, it's reducing the power by duplicate.
Okay, understood. What? You can ask.
Yeah, thank you for that. What would that distance be?
I will be pulling that up in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
That's a math question.
It was a long report, 1 second. It was approximately 106 feet outwards
So
from the antenna emission level.
so every 106 feet, the emissions cuts in half?
Every feet, it reduces in half.
Every 12 inches, every.
12 inches, yes.
Yeah, every foot, the transmission strength reduces.
Reduces
half.
by double, yeah.
Understood, okay. So, all right, I have to do, I understand what you're saying. And then, do the enclosures minimize any of the radiation by chance, or the emissions?
Not necessarily. Reason is the proposed rooftop mounts are fiber reinforced plastic. It's a radio frequency transparent material that allows the penetration of radio frequency outwards. And the reason that they use that material is to allow them to have that transmission and have that 101 freeway coverage that they need.
Okay, do you have any follow-up questions? Because you sparked some thoughts on for me, and I want to know where you're going to go
Yeah,
with
no,
that.
I mean, I guess admittedly, I'm not a scientist or a public health expert, so please take this with a grain of sand here. But I struggle to understand how, if I'm in this building and I'm on the third floor, presumably I think it's a three-story building, and I'm directly below the antenna in an office, how we lose, because on the ground floor, there's still 80% or nearly 80% of the federal allowable emissions, et cetera, and radiation. On the rooftop itself is nearly 1,800. So I fail to understand where the other 100% of the radiation goes in that. And I understand the directionality and the beams and all that, but clearly, if you're at the front of the building, you're still getting some radiation. So I fail to understand how, if you're sitting below and there's one ceiling between you and the antennas, that there's not as significant. I know there will be a drop-off, but there's a delta there that's pretty significant.
The difference is not the emissions itself, but the measure of the exposure. And the reason that they use the exposure is to measure the limitations of what is safe from a health perspective versus not. So the directional emissions and the directional exposure is the highest right in front of the antennas. Actually, the safest place to be is right below an antenna because the emissions go straight forward and they don't dissipate downwards.
Got it, okay. So where's the 80%, sorry, I'm like scrolling up and down through the report, but where would be, I think it was like 72% or 78% on the ground floor. Where is that calculation done? Is that done at the 106 feet away from the property in which the emissions completely drop off? Like, I'm just confused where, sorry, I'm pulling. Is that question clear? Right here, max predictive it's on page 3 in the T-Mobile site summary. It says max predictive is, sorry, I was a little off, 1,538.4% at the roof, the general population limit at the roof level, which that's why there's all the warnings, et cetera. But the max predictive on the ground level is still almost 80%. So I hear you that there's no drop off and that the safest place might be right under the antennas, but clearly there's somewhere that the general population at the ground level would still be exposed to 80%. I know it's what the federal government says is okay, but that there's still some drop off in the emissions and whatnot.
If you can clarify the question.
Yeah, I'll re-clarify. So there's 2 percentages here that are provided about the limitation of the predictive RF EME at the site. One is on the roof, one is at the ground floor, the ground level. The 80% or 79.3%, to be clear, at the ground level, where is that conducted? Like, how is that number determined?
Can you clarify what page that was in the EME?
It's page 3 in the site summary.
It's this
It's the
figure.
Yeah, the bright pink, thank you,
Right here.
table 1.
Oh.
And I apologize in advance, I didn't reach out to staff with this question.
Okay, those are not the occupational limits, they are the general population limits. So basically, the general population limits below 100% is the safety mark. So it's below the safety mark on the ground level, and at the rooftop, it's the right in front of the antennas that you see the general population limits, which is the 1,538%.
Okay, thank you. So it's not necessarily the volume of impact potentially, it's what is acceptable from population around the building?
On the ground level.
On the ground level, yes.
Yes.
So there's 80%, okay.
Correct.
So then this poses an entire new thread of questions. What happens when, if any new occupants come into the area, if there's a new building proposed, I know there was some open space with, that's part of our affordable housing. So presumably that might be developed one day. To me, it seems like if there's only maybe 50, 75% occupancy rates with the businesses there, like housing right down the street is going to be greater, and we will really quickly exceed that delta. So I'm curious to know what the future is there.
So, like I mentioned during my presentation, we did add a condition of approval to address those concerns. Essentially, if there is a development that were proposed or any changes to the site, that the carrier would be responsible to make sure that they are compliant with FCC regulations when it comes to emissions and human exposure. So that's what this condition of approval essentially says.
So basically, we were aware that potentially there's going to be a residential
multifamily.
development next door. And if that happens, it is the responsibility of T-Mobile to make sure that the emissions are reduced just in case the development is abutting right next to the controlled access zone or within the controlled access zone, that T-Mobile will be solely responsible to reduce the emissions or even tweak the azimuths of the antennas to make sure that that controlled access zone does not reach the abutting new development.
Okay, and I know you may not, thank you, that's really helpful, and I appreciate the clarity on the percentages. I now see the general population limit, so that's actually much more clear. My question then will be, if any potential housing comes and that 80% at the ground goes to 2,000%, because we're talking about housing, and people obviously spend much more time in their homes than they do in their offices, et cetera, what happens? Is the operation cease to exist? I know you said they can tune it down, but at a certain point, there's a threshold in which that's not even achievable. So I'm just curious to know.
At that point, when the threshold, the percentage increases on the ground level, at that point, T-Mobile needs to do and actually present a new radio frequency analysis report so that we can analyze the new numbers and based on that recommend conditions of approval and mitigation measures. And potentially it would be, for example, tweaking or eliminating completely one of the azimuths in that direction of the new residential building.
And is there a cease and desist or something that we could build into this in which if this comes temporarily, they've got to cease operations until they can come into compliance? Because we're talking about human health here and potential for housing, and this is a hot button issue in our city, just generally speaking. But I think it would behoove us to future-proof the idea that there could be a beam of emissions pointed directly in someone's home that could be continuous, unbeknownst to them, and I want to ensure that we can avoid that at all costs.
I would presume that the development is going to take time in order to happen, and I'm not well versed as to the height of the development of the adjacent parcel, but when that happens, prior to occupants inhabiting that building, my assumption would be at that point, the city will reevaluate the emissions and make sure that T-Mobile will readjust its azimuths prior to people inhabiting in that residential building.
I also wanted to add that I did inform the applicant that there is potential for housing there, and I did show them the last site plan that we had, so they did account for that in their design. And I think I can probably defer that to the applicant to address that issue. As far as in the future, if the site plan does change, T-Mobile would be responsible for adjusting any emissions or exposure on the site.
Okay. One last question. Obviously, having almost half a decade of lack of compliance is of deep concern. And so I understand that they have modeled for the future potential for housing. Again, we have evidence that shows that there's lack of compliance. I don't necessarily believe that could have been, another contractor for T-Mobile, so apologies. But how do we ensure that if there's any lick of lack of compliance throughout this process that we can assert our rights and ensure that the public health is taken in the utmost seriousness given the history with this specific site and the future for housing in the area?
I'll hop in here. So we do have the right to inspect at any time. And so if we have that condition of approval and find that they're violating their condition of approval, then we can revoke their conditional use permit really at any time if they don't comply.
Thank you.
I would love to if you could explain to me the 1,500% of the FCC general population limit on the rooftop level. I'm not a telecommunications expert or a radiologist, I don't know. So I don't really know what exactly that, can you explain that for us, please?
Yes. So whenever we receive a radio frequency report such as this one, we have the emissions in watts effective radiated power. We take those powers as well as the azimuths and the tilts of the antennas, and we use it through formulas in order to come up with the controlled access zone. And then after that, we look at the percentage of what is the safety margin based on the FCC requirements from their radio frequency exposure guidelines to see where we are with that specific area of exposure for general population.
Okay, so does that mean that the striped part where on the rooftop that you're referring to is 1,500% of the FCC's general population limit, just in that section?
That's the only section that is exceeding the general population limits, and that's the only controlled access zone on this rooftop created by the current design of the antenna.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then something that came to me is just that, now we're going to have these antenna enclosures, so it's going to be possibly it might be impossible to know if any construction or changes happen because it's enclosed. Is in the conditions of approval, could we add that we do an annual inspection on the enclosures on the site just to make sure that over time they're not saying, oh, let's add another antenna because no one's going to see it because it's enclosed. Is that possible? Or, I know we can do, we can make that happen if we want to. So just considering the history of the site.
Yeah, I would just say that technically we could add that to the conditions of approval, but we can inspect it anytime anyway, so I would just say that it doesn't necessarily need to be added. If that was the will of the Planning Commission to have us inspect for a certain number of years afterwards, then we could just add that to our work plan.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the one red light is consistent. Taking that a step further, Robbie, and I wouldn't want to impose on our city staff to be responsible for that, given the fact that the applicant and they've already demonstrated non-compliance, working in government affairs and dealing with compliance all the time. This one hits close to home, and so I think it would be incumbent. I think it would be incumbent on the applicant and T-Mobile to ensure compliance. How could we modify potentially the additional conditional approval here that's not in our draft resolution to ensure that the applicant themselves demonstrate consistency across what's required of them on an annual basis, and then some sort of triggered evaluation if and when any sites are developed. I know this kind of addresses that, but I just want to make sure we can really understand what our authority is as a city and a planning commission.
So I'll also defer to Lori if she has any thoughts, but under the federal process, the section 6049, 6049 process, anytime there'd be a modification to this facility, they would need to show compliance with the existing approvals that are in place. So that's one mechanism. And then as far as kind of occasional check-ins, inspections of the site, I'll defer to city staff on kind of what's possible. We could write annual inspections, for example, into the conditions, but take time and resources that the city would have to invest.
So real quick on that, and Robbie, jump in here in a second. If we were to have an additional condition kind of along those lines, that doesn't violate the federal law, right? The applicant couldn't say this is a violation of the federal law, and therefore that's preemptive of the city's authority? I know it was a very legal question, but I just want to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a position.
What I could suggest is writing a condition of approval that, for every year for the first 5 years, upon a specific date, we could require photographic evidence of that conditions at the site are as approved, or I think Lori might have some suggestion as well, so I'll defer to Lori too.
And real quick, for other context I think might be helpful for the commission, Travis, to your point about what existing statutes were on the books from the federal perspective that required those communications, which from my understanding tonight we didn't receive, how many times, were those applicable back then, those laws? One, and then two, how many times did the applicant violate federal law in communicating with the city around this project?
I'm not sure about the details of that, but I will say as kind of background, this area is a highly regulated area by the federal government. The city, state officials, including planning commissions, are not actually allowed to deny projects based on concerns over public health because of RF.
Okay.
So even if we had an annual inspection, the inspection would be to the extent that the compliance of the project with the conditions of our CUP.
Got it.
That's the boundary of our jurisdiction. Anything related to RF, any concerns about public health, that falls within the jurisdiction of the federal government, and that wouldn't be on the city to kind of guarantee compliance. And I think Lori has additional thoughts.
Can I just jump in, because I haven't gotten to ask any questions yet.
It's the pleasure of being the chair.
Right. So the enforcement of the RF health and safety would fall under the jurisdiction of the FCC, correct?
That's correct. And we also have conditions of approval requiring them to comply with FCC regulations, which they would have to do anyway, but that's kind of a belt and suspenders kind of thing that we're adding.
Right. I think one of the questions that's come up from just this, line of questioning is there a way to enforce the cadence of compliance? Ooh, that's a fun phrase that I put together there. I mean, is there a way to, I guess, and is there a way to put the onus or the obligation for the resources that would need to be expended by the city onto the applicant in order to, I guess, assure that we are in compliance, that they are in compliance with federal law?
So the draft additional condition of approval includes a provision that would require the carrier to pay for any sort of compliance costs. So maybe that answers the question.
Right, because, I know that there's a lot of concern about draining, resources of staff, from a labor and a budgetary standpoint. So that's a question, right? Is if we established a cadence for assuring compliance with the federal requirements and with our CUP, is there a way to put that obligation or explicitly state that obligation cost would be assumed by the applicant?
So is the question if the Planning Commission tonight decides that they want to add a condition for, let's say, annual inspection, could we have the carrier pay for staff time for that? Is that
Correct.
the question?
One thing that I might recommend is just requiring them to submit photographs to us on either probably a yearly or triannual basis. That way, we don't have to go out for an inspection and get on the roof.
Right.
That way they would just submit photographs to us when they go out to maintain the property.
You're going to really like this next question. So with those photographs, right, would we be able to specify, exact photographs, right? So obviously there's concern about the enclosure. I don't have concerns about the enclosure as far as, I understand why we would have, why they want to have an enclosure, and from a cosmetic standpoint, I think it's a smart idea. But I think that one of the things that, my fellow commissioners are extremely concerned about is because there has been evidence of malfeasance in the past, that there is not a great level of trust as to putting the obligation or the homework, right? Giving them the homework of proving compliance. So could there be, specificity as far as, okay, yes, there are photographs of what the condition of the roof looks like, but what about photographs or audit trails of measurement of the, RF exposure?
So before we go further down that hole, there's actually a condition of approval that'll address all of your questions.
Okay.
In the draft conditions, it's number 29, where essentially they have to submit a compliance report every 2 years.
Okay. So right now it's every 2 years.
And I'll try to bring it up so you can have a visual of it, but it's also in your staff report.
And that compliance will take care of actually not having the physical way to see it through photographs, because those antennas are going to be behind fiber reinforced plastic, and from a naked eye we won't be seeing how many panel antennas are behind it after the approval. That condition was carefully crafted so that in the future, once we use this as a baseline, every 2 years they need to provide and furnish us with radio frequency report so that we can cross compare and make sure that the emissions from the antennas are still the same, or if they're going to do any changes, we are well aware of it.
But there is not any obligation to show photographic evidence at this time. It just the audit trail of the RF is what, I'm just trying to make sure I understand that correctly. Because I mean, when I read that, I saw that there was, obviously a obligation of compliance, but I was, again, with the fact that there was previous malfeasance, I'm just trying to understand exactly what that reporting entails.
So the photographs that you are referring to, basically outside of the external parapet extensions, or within it, of how many antennas are there?
Right. I'm trying to create an audit trail of how many antennas, because since there were, I won't say improvements, there were additions made, during the non-compliance period. That's what I'm trying to ascertain is like, again, if we're doing a count, at the end of, the project construction, right? If we're waiting another 2 years, and again, like the data is explicit, right? Then what's to stop T-Mobile from going in and putting in a half a dozen other devices in that time period and then going, oh, December's coming up, let's take out those other 6 before we have an audit. That's why I'm concerned about putting the onus of evidence of compliance onto the applicant as far as them providing the support for that versus having an outside body, either the city or an independent inspector, assure compliance. That's my concern that I'm trying to ascertain. I understand like the limitations on enforcement of health and safety, but again, the fact that there has been previous non-compliance is my largest issue because the trust has been broken.
Yeah, and thank you for your comments. If I may too, I think not having a robust history of what was the original requirements for the site where there was non-compliance for 5+ years, right? Was this a behavior that was already being done back then? To a more limited understanding, it sounds like to a degree, but I don't know what the reporting requirements were. So, I echo your concerns on this, that, yeah, the lack of compliance in the past specifically, and given the fact that there's a proposed housing plan very close to the site is deeply concerning.
Can I ask what the, in the report, it only says unpermitted modifications to the facility? Is there anything specific about that? Is it because they've added more antennas unpermitted, or was it like striping that they didn't put that they should have put? Like to what extent are we really talking about?
So what I did to analyze what was modified without permits, I compared the 2015 wireless permit to the permit that they just submitted in 2025. And I compared the equipment manufacturer and model and noticed that there were several antennas that were changed out that weren't accounted for between 2015 and 2025.
And do you know how many times were they just changed out once? But did the applicant?
That I don't know how many times they changed it out. My staff report does say that I believe there was about 2 or 3 that were changed out.
Okay. Okay. I guess because I think that I could kind of take a step back and say, okay, we don't need to do an annual check, but how frequently do antenna software or antenna styles update? Is it do antennas kind of last, does the technology change every 5 years? Does it change, because this is a 10-year period we're talking about. Do we need to put a condition where we go out there every 5 years just to make sure that exactly what is on the permit is still there? And it doesn't have to be with you guys, we can still get the reports on every 2 years, but to know that they aren't changing out equipment, would we be able to see that? Or even adding equipment, and now they're facing a antenna facing in a direction that we're not accounting for, and it is going to impact the general population. That's, I think, where my concern comes from, because it's enclosed, so we really can't tell if anything is added, afterward.
So that question is a very tough question to answer in the sense that the changes are carrier specific depending on their coverage and capacity needs in a very specific area. So we cannot foresee, from a technology standpoint, let's say we're talking 4G, 5G, is generally happening every 3 to 5 years that a major shift happens in the associated equipment that will impact the emissions. However, when it comes to actual specifications and types and models of antennas or remote radio units or any associated equipment, it all depends on what the carrier needs in a specific area.
Of course, they're not going to update equipment they don't need to update. Yeah.
And there's no criteria for us to base ourselves and say, for example, this specific carrier has to update this antenna for this specific reason.
Understood. Okay.
And if I could just add on to that as well, I do just want to point out that the whole, the reason we know they were out of compliance is because T-Mobile, when they took over the site and then they submitted for their 6409 in 2020, it was because they were trying to comply with the city's regulations. And so this T-Mobile the applicant has been working with us to comply. So I don't want to paint a broad brush and say that they've been a bad person or company to work with. So we're here because they're trying to comply, and so that's just something that I kind of want to point out. And I do think in reading condition number 29, this is sufficient in allowing us to require really whatever we need to require compliance with the approved site plans. So as has already been stated as well, we don't determine compliance with the FCC radio frequency regulations, but we would be asking for those reports every 2 years based on condition number 29.
You're not on.
Every time, thank you. What is expected of the other sites within the city? Is that 2-year a standard process for us? I don't, again, want to over encumber the staff. One, and then two, change of ownership is something that's occurred multiple times here. We all know how business works in America. That presumably could happen again. So what conditions are within the draft resolution that would protect the spirit of what we're trying to, I think, get to tonight in light of a ownership change of the equipment itself or the building?
Yeah, so the conditions of approval run with the land, no matter whether it's T-Mobile or the new operator that comes in afterwards. So regardless, we would be able to hold them to condition number 29 and the proposed condition that was on the screen earlier in the presentation. Those two conditions, in my mind, are sufficient for the city to ensure that they're compliant with all applicable regulations and the conditional use permit.
I was going to defer to the applicant, but now that we've been going through all these questions, I'm going to just ask staff then. So on page 10 of the compliance report, everything is determined on theoretical modeling. To be honest, I have no idea what that means. Can someone explain just what that theoretical modeling is? Because they're basically now saying, this report is saying that T-Mobile will be compliant with FCC rules. But how does the theoretical modeling work?
I can answer that question. Because wireless facilities are often reviewed before the actual construction happens, applicants typically submit the predictive radio frequency compliance studies that are prepared by their qualified PEs. These studies estimate the anticipated radio frequency exposure levels and the emissions from the facility based on the actual proposed types of antennas and the associated equipment that they're trying to deploy on the rooftop.
So I really understand now, every 2 years, T-Mobile's got to do an inspection and report to the FCC. Does the FCC actually review and report then even back and saying you're out of compliance? I'm just curious exactly, because we're not going to be reviewing those reports. There's going to be the FCC is responsible.
Actually, the federal law, the FCC has the exclusive authority over the radio frequency emissions. However, the compliance requirements are within the city's rights to ask for compliance from the applicants. And the theoretical modeling is right now from what they're trying to do. Once we have that baseline, once they deploy the site and we know what the emissions are, going forward within the 2 years, every 2 years, the radio frequency reports that are submitted our way are based on what the current site is operating under. They don't send it to the FCC to review for compliance. The city actually does the in-house compliance reviews. based on the radio frequency reports that are submitted.
And we have the ability to know whether or not those are accurate?
We have we rely on the professional engineer stamps that the radio frequency reports are submitted, and we cross-compared with the construction drawings, with the specifications of the antennas and the make and model.
So therefore, any engineer that's stamping these reports could face substantial fines if they're inaccurate, and we're relying on those reports.
We do review the RF reports from a compliance standpoint when it comes to the emissions, and we actually cross-compare and calculate the same numerical values to make sure that the report has the correct values. And if they don't, we do go back to the applicant to revise those reports and send us the correct ones.
Okay, I'll defer my rest of my questions for the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask? Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay,
Commissioner Kotzer.
now that all these questions are coming up, what is safe for the radio frequency? Is it minutes, hours, days? And how is it measured? Because, you know, I'm a doctor, radiologists wear badges, and they calculate how much exposure they have, so.
Can I just make a clarifying statement? There is a difference between radiologists deal with radiation.
Right.
There is a difference between radiation
Right.
and RF exposure. RF and radiation are not the same thing. I'm just putting that out there because there's been some confusion with the lines of questioning, and I just want to be perfectly explicit that there is a difference between radiation and RF.
No, I know that. I'm a doctor.
Right.
I'm just saying, as far as radio frequency, I'm just giving an example that there are badges or measurements. So, I mean, how would that be calculated?
So, in order to piggyback off Chair Reinhardt's information, federal law prohibits state and local governments from denying or even regulating the wireless facilities based on the environmental or the health effects of radio frequency emissions when the facilities are actually operating within the FCC compliance limits. When it comes to the emissions, the emissions from the antennas are continuously emitting to cover and provide the coverage for that area.
And also, you said emission is like a flashlight. What do you mean by that?
Basically, the panel antennas right now that we are reviewing are directional panel antennas, and the emissions from those antennas, as if they're going straight outwards, they don't deviate into different locations or backwards or downwards. They are directional.
And also, I saw a new service light. What is meant by that?
So the service light is essentially just illumination for workers who are on the rooftop.
So is it downward?
Yes.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification on radio frequencies and radiation.
Okay.
But what I do want to ask is something that was specifically said is that compliance, as long as it's currently in compliance, we have no local control over the existence of the approval of the project, correct?
What the city can look into is to ensure that the applicant demonstrates compliance with the FCC's RF exposure guidelines.
What supersedes then in the event that housing is actually built and developed right on the right next to the property, or the adjacent building owner decides to convert their current office over to housing? Does that, what is the order of precedence in terms of compliance, out of compliance, and then, action that the city can take?
The compliance is basically making sure that general population is not directly in the controlled access zone at all times. So regardless if an adjacent building is for office buildings or inhabitants, it's not going to make a difference. It is still considered general population limits. And at that point, when the adjacent residential building is going to be built, then the last proposed condition of approval should kick in to make sure that it is the duty of the applicant or the carrier to make sure that they reduce their emissions, to make sure that the adjacent property is not within the controlled access zone.
Okay, so then that's where then the public health element of the project, we would then, the kind of power and the authority of the city to determine what happens at the site then shifts back over to us versus it's compliant, there's not much you can do.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry, Katrina, sorry to do this. Would you mind reading the condition into the record? I'm sorry, I know it's long.
Sure. The permittee shall, at its sole cost and expense, ensure that the wireless facility remains in full compliance with all applicable federal RF emissions and exposure regulations at all times, including those of the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. The permittee shall fully cooperate with the city and adjacent property owners regarding any RF compliance matters arising during the term of the permit, including providing updated RF studies, implementing mitigation measures, and addressing any actual or potential RF exposure exceedances. The permittee shall bear the sole and The permittee shall bear the sole and continuing responsibility for maintaining RF compliance for the facility and all surrounding properties, including compliance impacts resulting from future changes to surrounding structures, uses, access conditions, occupancies, or site conditions, and shall promptly implement any corrective measures necessary to maintain continuous RF compliance.
Thank you. I actually have one follow-up question. So right now at the ground floor, it's at 80% compliant with the population.
Below the limitations, yes.
Yeah, sorry, it's like 79.2 or 0.3. What, it was referred to the applicant, the proposed site plans adjacent, but if that and any of the proposed plans that the city has seen for the adjacent lots does get developed and built out and then occupied in the next 10 years, which I don't think is an unreasonable expectation with what we've seen in our community, what would that percentage at the ground floor then become?
I will not have an answer to that until we pull the radio frequency report at that time.
So even though we've already provided the site plans, potential site plans to the applicant tonight, we don't know how many potential units in those proposed plans there would be?
It depends on the new projects, where the buildings are located, and I remember it also dissipates based on number of feet from that project. So that's where once we actually do receive one of those applications and then deem it complete, we would then have several years before it actually gets constructed to work that out with between T-Mobile and the residential facility to be able to make sure that they're complying with the RF emissions.
Appreciate it. I think sorry to be particularly difficult on this one. I just hope you can understand how it's complex because there's proposed housing right next to it. We're already at 80%. Presumably the occupancy in that area isn't that high. So the housing, which we know will get filled pretty quickly in our community, would exceed that number very quickly. And I know that there's a latency and a drop-off in which the RF would potentially impact any of those buildings, but it's still a consideration that I think this somewhat addresses, but we can deliberate a little bit further. But I appreciate all of staff's answers and responses tonight.
Did you have additional?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one last question. Well, I hope it's my last question. Yeah, right. The signage that's proposed, the caution, these ones, are these the signs that will be on the rooftop?
There are multiple signage. Some of them will be on the access door when actually somebody is going to get on the rooftop. The signage that you will see next to the antennas is within the RF report. That will be the RF notice and the caution signage.
Okay, and then are there going to be any warning signs or caution signs or notice signs at the ground level when entering the building or entering the property? Is there a concern for anyone that enters the building that has like a pacemaker or like medical conditions or anything like that? Is that any?
No,
okay,
it's irrelevant.
Okay, and then I'm assuming the roof access will be limited by like key cards or locks or anything like that?
Yes, we have conditions of approval to mitigate and make sure that there's locking mechanisms that only people who are actually going to be working on the rooftop will have access to the rooftop.
Okay, and then the last safety measure was barriers. Is the barrier the enclosure, or is there something else that's the barrier?
No, the barriers are not the enclosures. There's two types of barriers in general for radio frequency protections. There's the physical barriers, which are bollards and chain links, and there's other types of barriers, which are the non-physical barriers, which are the paint striping. So the barriers in this project are the paint striping in front of Sector C, that small area that exceeds the controlled access zone.
Okay, so in the presentation, barriers and striping were separated as safety measures. So are they like striping is a barrier and then there are other barriers?
No, they're actually there's no physical barriers proposed here, only the barriers which are the RF striping, they need to be one.
Okay, and the ball and chain, we don't have that in this condition?
No, generally that is used for areas that are much larger controlled access zones.
Okay.
Because right here, if we put a ball and chain, it's literally going to be two posts right next to each other with no link that has an RF signage on it.
Understood. Okay. That is all, those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, so, I hear everybody's concerns about, health and safety, but also I hear staff and council's, advice that we, are very limited on, or, prevented from enforcing health and safety because it falls under the federal jurisdiction. I do want to just say that I think that there's a lot of the line of questioning is related to the general public's lack of understanding as far as how radio frequency and radio frequency exposure works. So it's kind of like when you say to our robot friends, explain it to me like I'm 5. I think that there's I think that one of the things that would be very helpful in the future is if there is a way to really break down, like by definition, again, like there's a difference between radiation and RF exposure, right? One thing that I understand, and this is because I've had exposure to some of these terms, and I have my ham radio license. I got it like 30 plus years ago, so it's been a while since I studied Ohm's law and other such things. But what I understand, based on staff reports and everything, is the most immediate threat to health and safety is immediately in front of one of these antennas for a prolonged period of time, right? Because the thing that I think that one of the gaps in understanding is that, prolonged exposure is what could potentially be an issue, and that there is also not necessarily long-term evidentiary support, depending on the frequency, right, of what the actual health and safety concerns could be. For example, right, there are no microwave transmissions up here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so just to clarify for everyone, microwave transmissions, especially right in front of a microwave antenna, that's where people have died because they've been right on top of a microwave antenna that didn't have proper signage. So what the barrier with the striping is designed to do is to warn any person who is up on that roof that presumably is up there for official business and understands what their risk profile is for maintaining or interacting with that antenna, right? That they have to take certain, personal steps in order to make sure that they are minimizing their risk, correct?
Correct, and the prolonged exposure that you mentioned is the actual duration that they're standing in front of that antenna directly.
Right, so the antennas that are proposed here or that currently exist, do you happen to know what the exposure time would be if you were standing right in front of it that would be hazardous to your health as a professional worker?
The exposure guidelines for occupational workers are different than general population.
Okay, are they higher or are they lower?
they are lower and less stringent because they are controlled population. They know how to limit their exposure, specifically standing in front of the antenna, and they know how to measure with their meters of how long they need to stand there and not stand there.
Okay.
So from a roofer standpoint, the mitigation measures, which are the paint striping as well as the radio frequency signage that is proposed, is to let them know that, hey, there is an area that might exceed and will exceed that paint striping area. And if they need to do any work within that specific area, then they need to coordinate with the carrier so that temporarily the emissions are reduced or even shut down so that they can do their work within that immediate vicinity.
And any worker that would be up on that roof, is a presumption being made that they have been trained on that safety?
No.
Or there is no, again, the onus is not on the carrier or on the building owner for whoever is contracted up there to do maintenance to understand the risk profile?
No. So all roofers, HVAC workers, anybody who maintains the rooftop are not categorized as occupational workers. They're categorized as general population workers, and the controlled access zone areas that we are proposing, the paint striping, is for general population limits. And specifically, if there's going to be work by any general population member within that area, they need to make sure that the emissions are either reduced or turned off for the duration of their work in that area.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm just going through the litany of questions that were asked and just trying to make sure that I'm understanding that there wasn't something that kind of flagged for me a follow-up question. And I guess just to clarify again, with the way that the antennas are designed, and I think the analogy pretty much holds. You were saying that it's like a flashlight. Flashlights are pretty accurate these days as far as how far they can transmit. I think of more of like an old school flashlight where the beam of light dissipates out, the further away it gets, but up close it's accurate. So would a more accurate statement be that it's more like a high beam light on your car? Because I feel like that's a more controlled. It's controlled at the beginning of the path of light, but then it does dissipate out and kind of weaken as mathematically as it goes away.
Yes, so the dissipation is actually the loss of power from that antenna.
Okay, that's a good clarifying statement. Thank you. And right now, with these types of antennas, I know in the report forgive me, it's late. I know that in the report it states the amps or the wattage, but would these be considered in the industry by industry standards? Would these be considered low, medium, or high powered transmission facilities?
This is a macro facility, so relatively speaking, compared to small wireless facilities, their power is stronger. That's exactly why we have the mitigation measures to make sure that we control the areas that are exceeding the general population limits. And I can defer that to the applicant as well to discuss that.
Okay, and just to clarify again, the structures that the cupolas that the antennas would be put in are not. They do not hinder the strength of the transmissions in any way, shape, or form, which is by design, of course, so that cosmetically it's more pleasing to the eye, and we don't have thank God we don't have any of the fake trees, right? Like we don't have the pine tree sitting up on top of the roof of one of these things, but it's basically a more aesthetically pleasing pine tree, correct?
Yes, the fiber reinforced plastic cupolas are primarily designed to hide the antennas and the associated equipment so that from a public perspective, It's beautifying the building rather than having what we call in the industry popsicle mounts, which is literally a stick and an antenna at the top.
Right.
So we're trying to prevent that, and this design is actually going to enclose the antennas within that fiber reinforced plastic, and it's going to make it more pleasing to the public, not seeing those sore antennas like to die.
The eyesores, right? And again, thank God we don't have any towers either. So again, with that said, it does not hinder the transmission. It's only purpose. The structure's purpose is beautification, correct?
Correct. Fiber reinforced plastic material is radio frequency transparent, so it will allow the emissions from behind the FRP outwards from the screen.
Okay. Humor me. Do you happen to know, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, the average lifespan of the materials that the cupola is made out of?
Fiber reinforced plastics generally range a good 5 to 10 years. However, what we need to take into consideration that when they're built, they're really nice looking, but we have to take into consideration in the long run, because of sunlight, they tend to fade out just a little bit. And if you cross compare a brand new fiber reinforced plastic or a fiber reinforced plastic, which is like 7 to 10 years down the line, you're going to see some slight discoloration in them, which at that point, there might be condition of approval that can be added that in the long, actually we do have a condition of approval that they need to maintain the fiber reinforced plastic to make sure that it's integrated with the underlying building facade.
Is it maintain or replace? Or is there a
Let me double check
Okay.
the condition.
I just wanted to add too that we have a physical sample if that's something that you would like to take a look at.
You have it now? Sure. Let's take a look.
It's an example of
Okay.
a fiber reinforced plastic.
We love show and tell. Thank you. Thank you, Katrina. And again, thank you to staff for answering the extensive amount of questions that we have that are not related to.
I do
FCC.
have one follow-up, and maybe I have completely missed it with all the questions and answers. And I was going to ask, yep, but you seem to be very knowledgeable. What is current versus proposed? I mean, how much more RF frequency are we going to be expecting this to go to from where it is currently? I mean, just trying to get an idea of what the delta is. I mean, are we talking 10%, 20%, 30%?
When you mention current, it just talks about the current site as it exists today. The proposed is what the applicant is proposing with the changes and the relocations and the modifications. So the current is actually what we have right now as existing, and the proposed is going to be the future modifications that they are proposing based on how we actually foresee the site going.
No, I guess just clarification then. So existing and then there's proposed is how much increase in the RF energy that's going to be, I'm not even sure what the word is.
So from a radio frequency perspective, the current and proposed are unrelated because the proposed is going to take into consideration, actually it's going to be an add-on because if they decide to keep some of the antennas, then the proposed is going to accumulate the emissions from the current antennas plus the modification proposal. But when we do review the radio frequency reports, they actually include all the antennas that are going to be in place once they are permitted and constructed.
Okay, I'll for more clarification from the applicant.
Okay. One more question.
My question wasn't really answered. I said, how long does the exposure have to be with the radio frequency? Minutes, hours, or days? And it was just going around in circles.
I also, I think, asked that based on
Yeah,
based on someone who is standing, in the direct path of the transmission. in the immediate, like, rooftop zone? Is that the question you were asking, Commissioner Platzer, was?
My question was, I mean, if the exposure of the workers or people around is minutes, hours, or days, and how is it measured? And that's why my example was, there must be a meter of exposure. So that really wasn't even answered.
So the exposure happens when you're standing right in front of the antennas. It's non-ionizing exposure, which means that it's not cumulated like X-ray machines. But when you're there, you are being exposed. Occupational population do carry, like the people who are actually working on rooftops for specifically antennas, they do carry meters that actually measure the exposure. And based on the level of that specific antenna that they are in front of, it will measure based on the power outage of the antenna, and it will have a beeping noise to say that you have reached the maximum exposure MPE, so that they can move back away from it, so that they're not in there prolonged duration, and then they can step back into it and they're okay.
That's what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Just to answer your question regarding the fiber reinforced plastic, we do have a condition of approval, which is, I believe, condition of approval number 49, that fiber reinforced plastic screens, they need to be maintained at all times and must be painted to match the existing building materials in color, texture, and design.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're through our initial interrogation. Thank you.
I do have one more question.
Uh-oh, okay, one more.
Do we, as a city, keep stock of how many similar type sites like this exist, particularly on rooftops?
Yes, so when they submit a permit, it's just a permanent record for us.
And how many do we have?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's fine. Do the conditions require that the landlord and the owner of the property also adhere to all of the conditions that are required for any other worker? Or any of, like, right, if they're going up and they hire someone to go do some tile work up on the roof, like the owner, it's incumbent on them to ensure their safety, or who's the onus on that?
The underlying building owner doesn't have to make sure that the roofers or anybody need to comply with it. The RF safety signage is what determines the mitigation measures, and when roofers or any general population is on the rooftop, so long as the mitigation measures are actually maintained, because sometimes the signage fall or they discolor, so we need to make sure that they're maintained so that people who access the rooftop are well aware before they enter those zones.
Thank you. And then, go ahead. Last question, is the signage required to be bilingual?
That's a good question.
I know it's a federal thing, so given that a lot of these were updated in 2019, I could see that they're not, but I'm curious to know because we do live in California and we have many different folks who work in our community, so wondering if there's any bilingual requirements. I don't know if they're discussing this answer or another one, but okay.
I don't believe our city requires them to be bilingual.
Okay, so hypothetically, a property owner can hire a construction crew that is entirely speaking Spanish. They go to the roof, have no clue because they've never operated work on a rooftop that has this type of equipment, and not having English as their first language could be exposed if they don't, that's a hypothetical here that's possible. I know we cannot deny the project on that. I'm just curious to know everything.
That is a possibility, but I do believe that could probably be added as a condition of approval to include bilingual signage.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we are through our initial questions of staff. At this time, does anyone need a 5-minute recess?
Can we at least jump to ex parte communication, and then we can take a break if you want?
Counselor, would that be okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So I will I will ask, does any commissioner have any ex parte communications to disclose? And I will start with Commissioner Stein.
I did visit the site, tried to walk around. I drove along the freeway to see the visibility, and I did meet with staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Platzer?
Yeah, I did visit the site, and I also looked at it from the freeway as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Yeah, I would echo that. I knew someone who occupied a site, or they were in that building many, many years ago. They're no longer there, but so unrelated, but I never spoke to them about the project site or anything.
I spoke to staff,
Okay.
and I've seen the building for many years.
Right. I also spoke to staff, and I did drive by on, I think it's Agoura Road, from Agoura to Dorothy. So, okay. All right, at this time, it looks like it is 5 minutes to 8. So if we want to take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at 8 p.m., we will finish the agenda items and have the applicant speak. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Do I need to officially state when we're resuming session? Okay. So apologies for the delay. We are returning from recess at 8:05 p.m. Okay. And in the future, I'll just give a 10-minute. I was being optimistic. I apologize. Okay. So resuming public hearing item number 2. I will now defer to the applicant, who has been very patient, thank you. You and/or your representatives will have a total of 15 minutes for your presentation. Please adjust the microphone and watch for the red light on the podium. When you see the yellow light, you will have 1 minute to wrap up your comments.
My name is Joshua Hernandez. I'm here on behalf of T-Mobile. This project involves upgrades to an existing rooftop wireless telecommunications facility. The scope includes the reconfiguration of the antenna system, consisting of the removal of 4 antennas and their associated radios, the relocation of 3 existing antennas with their corresponding radios to new rooftop locations, and the installation of 3 new antennas, each with a corresponding radio. Additional work includes the removal and replacement of 2 existing equipment cabinet within the rooftop lease area, the installation of a new cable management system attached to the parapet wall, and installation of 1 GPS antenna. The project also includes the installation of architectural screening in the form of 2 rooftop cupolas, which will house and screen the antennas and related equipment and be designed to match the existing building. The objective of this project is to improve network performance and capacity while maintaining compliance with safety standards and minimizing visual impacts. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comments, does any commissioner have any questions of the applicant? And I'm sure we do. I'm going to start over here with Commissioner Stein. Oh, okay. Okay, all right. I was just trying to be equitable in how I go around, so,
I
you know.
appreciate it. I'll keep my questions
Commissioner
brief because we got a lot from staff. I want to appreciate you being here. Sorry you're on the hot seat tonight, but we really appreciate your availability. I guess my question is, you know, obviously there's a history of lack of compliance or non-compliance, and I know was re-clarified throughout the questions for staff that what, you know, part of the reason why we are here tonight is to bring everything into compliance. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what your affiliation is with T-Mobile. I'm not sure who was responsible for that in the past, but if we could get a little bit of a sense of what, you know, kind of what occurred and why, and you know, reassurances that that's, you know, I know we've got some things baked into the resolution that hopefully ensure the compliance, but obviously would love to hear a little bit more about what occurred and from your perspective that you can share.
Well, I'm actually from Network Connects. We're representing T-Mobile, so I don't really have all the history of why at what point it became non-compliant, but we were just tasked to bring the project up to compliance.
Thank you for that. Network Connects
Correct.
Was not the original installer of the equipment, et cetera. This is an entirely new project for you in the firm. And
Sorry. Yeah, as far as I know, I don't think we were, but I don't have any history on that myself.
in Network Connects, correct me if I'm wrong, if everything proceeds tonight, you all will be responsible for the duration of the 10-year process, or that can go back and forth, but as I understand from staff, the draft resolution that we have tonight before us ensures that no matter who is responsible in managing it, will have to comply. But for as far as you can see, how long will Network Connects be in part of, you know, part of the project team for that site and ensure that the compliance that we expect will be met?
I know they do site walks for our sites just to make sure things are in compliance, and there's constant communication with T-Mobile and the city. So I mean, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, so I guess you know, another way to ask it much more pointedly then would be, as far as I understand, even what with no amending language from the council tonight, the commission tonight, it would be incumbent on T-Mobile, and I assume their subsidiary contractors for the site to provide us a biannual report. Who's responsible for that? Would that be Network Connects? Is that T-Mobile? Is it a combination? Like, I just want to understand.
Sorry to catch that. The report you're saying?
Yeah, the required compliance report for every 2 years to ensure.
Oh, like the RF report?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, we would, whichever vendor is a task with that site, they would be the ones providing that report via a third party of licensed engineers.
Okay.
So.
And then so if T-Mobile deems Network Connects as satisfactory, you all would be continuing that reporting, et cetera, but there could be.
Well, that site's, that wireless facility would be T-Mobile, so I mean, whether it would be tasked to us or not, that would be up to them. But I do want to point out that RF reports are also, they're given each time they make a further modification. So if they're to add more equipment later down the line, let's say 5 years from now, we would do another RF report.
Yeah, I understand that there's the additional equipment requirement, but there's also a standard that we're, pardon me, would be applying, would be a 2-year, every 2 years from the date that the facility begins operations. We might need to clarify that. But my question is, like, who is responsible for that report to us?
That would be T-Mobile.
Okay.
So we would have contacts at T-Mobile that would be responsible for giving us that, whether they choose to do it themselves or hire separate subcontractors, up to them.
Okay.
Can I just jump in with a clarifying question? So the 2 years, it's 2 years, or if additional equipment is installed, correct? So it's a yes. Is it an either or a yes and?
All new equipment will require some sort of permit, so we would review it at that time with the appropriate level of review based on the scope of work.
And if there was no new equipment for 2 years, then there would also be a requirement for a RF report and inspection.
Correct.
Yes? Okay.
I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky on this. That is not how I read this. I read it as every time there's new equipment and every 2 years, no matter what.
Yes, that's correct. So the
Okay.
conditional use permit runs with the land.
Yeah.
And then, so it's 2 years regardless.
Yes.
And then whenever they upgrade the equipment, they would likely be through a modification, which is 6409.
Yeah.
They are required to demonstrate compliance upon approval and upon installation.
Yeah, but that's asynchronous from the 2 years.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
just, yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
I don't think I asked that clarifying question correctly.
All good.
More Diet Coke is required.
The last question I have, last question that I concluded with staff was about bilingual signage. This is actually both for you as the applicant and staff. Obviously, as I understand it, those are federally mandated signage. Do we have the ability to impose an additional language?
So without having done sort of a deep dive into the federal regulations, I think my advice at this time is that we do not impose additional bilingual signage requirements, but we certainly can ask the applicant if they would be willing to do that. I think that area of law is pretty well preempted by the federal regulations.
Yeah, and I want to be mindful of that. I also want to be mindful of, regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C., we live in Southern California, and our workforce, particularly around construction, oftentimes there's multiple languages being used, and so I just want to ensure the safety of anyone who might be going onto that roof and might not know what equipment is up there. So, hear you. Maybe we can find a path forward when we get to deliberations, but I appreciate that. In your experience, are there instances that you're aware of through your professional, your professional capacity in which bilingual language signage exists on properties like this?
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, I can ask.
Okay.
And yeah.
That concludes my questions.
Sure.
Now you've done it, because now I'm thinking about language. One. Okay, so as you said, there is not, in your experience, there is not bilingual signage. Would you say, though, that the signage that currently is required under federal regulation has universal, is there a universal standard as far as, like, you know, how there are like universal safety standards regarding different hazards? Is there a set, like, of industry universal standards that delineate caution?
I'm actually not too knowledgeable in all the RF safety signs, but I can get with a group, my team, that's more involved with that, and I could bring that up to staff.
Again, I'm just trying to echo Commissioner Roth's concerns about comprehension and making sure that people are safe, you know, regardless of where they, you know, might come from. It's like, you know, it is universally known what the radioactive symbol is, right? It was developed to be an international standard. So what, I guess, again, apologies because of the hour, but in your experience, there is no international safety language that exists regarding the signage that you would run into on a federal level. In your experience, you have not seen like a standard.
Honestly, I can't say.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, and Pandora's box was open, so had to ask. Now I've got them going.
I think
sorry.
Sorry, we might have had a slide showing what the signage would look like, right?
I saw the
Maybe we
signage.
can-
I just wanted to ask, is that, so, you know, again, like, I recognize some of those patterns, but are those, like, for example, like, notice, like, of radio exposure, right? You know, but is that a federal standard? Is that an international safety standard? Like, who sets the standard for what that safety sign looks like?
We also
And-
have Cal OSHA as well in California, and Cal
Okay.
OSHA, I do know in certain instances does exceed what the federal requirements are. So I just also want to put that out. So I don't know, Travis, to your point earlier, like obviously we should do a little bit of research, but this could exist something on Cal OSHA's purview, and we're not aware of it tonight.
Well, wouldn't the federal OSHA supersede the Cal OSHA?
It depends how the regulations are written.
Okay. Again, you know, went down the path. Okay, getting back on track here, are there any additional questions of the applicant at this time? I'm going to defer to Commissioner Platzer.
Yeah, how wide is the coverage? You're saying that it would enhance the coverage in Agoura.
I don't have that information on hand, but if you were to pull up the propagation maps, it'll give you an idea of how far the coverage would be. I don't know if staff could pull that up, please. Yeah, so the first one is without the antennas, and the second image is with the antennas. I can't give you the exact distance, but I mean, as you can see, the green field areas are what's being covered with the antennas. So it really does cover, helps with the gaps. And that's, yeah, that's pretty much one of our objective is to cover any gap that are missing.
So how many customers is that, do you know?
I'm sorry?
How many customers, do you know?
That is also, I think, yeah, a number that would be on the prop maps as well. Maybe on the next page?
I don't have that information.
You don't have it? Okay. I can work on getting that information for you. They usually have like they call it a POP, P-O-P, and that will have an estimate of how many customers. I can send it over to staff.
And this is just T-Mobile, it's not Verizon, and other people cannot hop onto this coverage, correct?
Yes, in certain instances, there are, if I recall correctly, there are agreements sometimes where customers from other carriers can use that. Like, for example, I think Mint, basically all the carriers are kind of under T-Mobile, like the ones that are bought out in years. But yeah, to answer your question, overall, they just cover overall T-Mobile customers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess just to clarify, so that it's like, if Coca-Cola owns 10 smaller soda companies underneath or has agreements for distribution with them, then it would pass through their network of distributors.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Exactly.
Right? So
Yeah.
so just to clarify, it's, T-Mobile has an agreement with some of the smaller carriers, then they would pass through the traffic, right?
Yeah.
Or the transmission.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Sharon.
Robbie, does this map, correct me if I'm wrong, it basically improves the Old Agoura Business District? Is that dark line along the middle, like middle, I guess? Is that the freeway, I would assume? So it looks like the improvement is really just like the business district and not actually, yeah, so that's the new updated map, but then like the old one, the red spot around the site. Can we see the other map? So is that really like the business corridor of Old Agoura that's being improved? Because it doesn't actually look like anything north of the freeway is getting improved. Is that the case?
So I believe to the southeast, that's primarily the highway, and then to the north, if I'm thinking, going to my Google Maps brain, I believe Chesborough is to the.
Because the site sits off right on like adjacent to the freeway, so I'm assuming that line like that darker line that cuts the entire photo, is that the freeway? And possibly. So.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so it looks like it's only really improving the. Listen, there could be plenty of customers in that area, but when we say we're improving Old Agoura, are we referring to the residential residents of Old Agoura or the business residents of Old Agoura?
So there are some residential districts just north of the highway, so I can imagine that there are some residences that get improved by this, and then also the Old Agoura commercial district.
Okay, all right.
Apologies. Now it's my turn to not hit the button. Again, are there any additional questions before we let the applicant sit? Okay, hearing none, thank you for your.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So at this time, we will move on to public comments. And I will defer to the city clerk for any public comments.
Thank you. We did not receive any written correspondence, nor do we have any speaker cards.
Thank you. Okay. Now I got to change pages here.
Can I ask a question? Before we get into deliberations?
Okay. Counselor, yes?
Yep, go ahead.
Are you the landlord or the property owner is the property owner here? Because how do we regulate, like if an air conditioner maintenance person wants to go on the roof, like we talked about like professionals having meters and knowing how to be on the roof with antennas, but and if they need to be doing prolonged work, they'll turn the antennas off. But what about like general maintenance of the building? They don't have access to the antennas and they can't turn them off, and they don't know anything about frequencies and safety measures and those types of things. So I'm curious about that, because we kind of got into the language of the signs and just, is the roof not going to be accessible to anybody but T-Mobile is going to have the access, like the key to the roof, or is the property owner going to have access, is to open it up to any type of vendors that have to access the property?
Generally, the rooftop will be accessed by T-Mobile personnel that are doing maintenance on the specific wireless site on the rooftop. However, the property manager, the property building owner through its management, excuse me, will have access as well. The rooftop door will have the notifications to update persons that are accessing the rooftop. But if HVAC people or roofers or anybody who is not well versed and is categorized as general population, which all HVAC and roofers are categorized as general population, will need to coordinate with the underlying building owner to coordinate with the carrier for a future date and time to do the work, so that the carrier can coordinate timelines to see the reduction of the emissions if the work is going to happen exactly within those controlled access zones. So coordination is needed.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Sorry, real quick. I don't want to do this during the public hearing portion. I've been doing a little bit of research. It does appear that the federal government does cede
Supersede.
its
Cede, oh,
authority
okay.
to California. There's a California state plan. What's not immediately clear to me right now is if it's a requirement for all warning signs in the state of California in certain situations to be bilingual. So I don't know if we can answer that tonight. But given kind of like what you just laid out, Commissioner Sharon, a second ago, I think there are circumstances in which we would want to protect anyone who's going up there who may be unaware of what they're walking into, and, looking at, I'm holding up the notices, right? So there's a signage notice that has a lot of text. It's in yellow, so again, I think it does give off the appearance that it is something that someone should be concerned about, but it doesn't inherently, if English was my second language or third language, there's a lot of text here that doesn't really specify, so if we could get clarity on what is currently required by state law, and as long as that state law is permissible to include within the draft CUP tonight and doesn't conflict with federal law, I think, that would be amenable to me.
So for purposes of tonight's hearing, I think we have at least two options. The first is we can continue the public hearing and we can go back and do the research and look at the preemption question. Another option would be to craft a condition of approval that would basically say, to the extent not superseded, preempted by state law, federal law, the city requires X, whatever the bilingual or other language requirement is that the commission would want to see. So I think those are two options before us, so you can kind of decide which way you want to go with that.
Thank you. And then if it were found throughout this process, from us, this will elevate up to the city council. Is that correct? Or is it? Okay. Though what we could have that as a requirement and be dropped off if it's found that there is overarching federal preemption and that what is presented to us tonight is what is required by law, and that's all that we can ever ask the applicant to ensure is up there.
So the commission can kind of wordsmith and we can kind of work on the language, but what I'm envisioning something like a condition like that saying is, to the extent not preempted by state law, we require the signs to X, Y, Z.
Or inversely, if the state law explicitly requires bilingual language as well.
So the conditions of approval already require compliance with all state and federal regulations,
Okay.
so that's kind of already baked in.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. At this time, are we, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so we are now ready to move on to deliberations. I will start with Vice Chair Sharon on this one. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. Thank you. I turned the page prematurely. Okay, so I deferred to the city clerk for public comments. We did not have any public comments. And I will now defer to the applicant. You will have 5 minutes for rebuttal if you choose to utilize it. Okay. So the applicant is not rebutting anything at this time. So before closing the public hearing, any other questions of staff or the applicant?
Travis, if I'm going to make a motion to add the recommendation that was on the board, would that be now or during deliberations?
During deliberations.
Okay.
Okay, so being that there are no further questions, I will now close the public hearing. See, I almost missed the chance to bang the gavel again. Okay, so now we will move on to deliberations. So I'm mixing it up tonight. I will call on Vice Chair Sharon to begin deliberations.
Thank you. Staff, thank you so much for, keeping up with my questions. This is totally out of my knowledge base, and so I appreciate it. It sounds like we are taking the necessary precautions needed. I would like to make a motion to add the condition of approval that is on the wall. I know that's not the verbiage I can use, but how would you like me to?
The same condition that Katrina read into the record earlier, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I make a motion. Do I need a second?
Commissioner,
Do we need, Counselor, would we make the motion in the second now, or would we do that at the conclusion of deliberations? Okay, so we should get comments before we formally make a motion
Okay.
and vote on adding the additional condition of approval.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
Okay, so if you have any other comments to your deliberations?
No, my deliberation, just to complete my deliberation, this seems like it seems like the project is coming forth so that we can actually so that T-Mobile can be compliant and I can make all the findings. And so, there are my deliberations.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Platzer.
I appreciate that T-Mobile is trying to comply because there was a 5-year gap of non-compliance and we're very nervous about it. And it seems like the FCC and the condition of approval has in it that we can look at this project every 2 years, I hope indefinitely, correct? And if it serves the community and is giving more coverage, I think it's a plus. I think the radio frequency needs to be monitored. But I concur with Commissioner Sharon that we should add the condition of approval as well. But I can make the findings otherwise.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Stein?
First of all, thanks staff, applicant. It's a long history of this project being at this property, since 1996. T-Mobile, I think, is trying to do the right thing. I mean, the primary goal of this conditional use permit, the way I understand it, is to remediate the violations, restore the site to legal compliance while modernizing the equipment. That's my understanding of going through the findings. I like the fact that they're going to do concealment, that there's language in there that it's going to have them maintain these new cupolas so that they look well all the time. To me, the whole question comes down to, does the public benefit of getting better coverage outweigh any risks associated with the increase of the, RF, energy that's being increased there. But other than that, I can make all the findings. And I would also include the additional language.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Thank you very much. Staff, apologies in advance for not having the opportunity to reach out and discuss this with you, so appreciate your responsiveness to my questions tonight. Obviously, my biggest concern is there's a gap in I think ownership and responsibility for the communication of safety for employees who might be servicing many different applications on the roof, whether it be T-Mobile, sub-applicant, the property manager, the property owner. To me, there's, the two findings that are here, I can make these findings. I understand what their intent is, but I don't have the municipal code in front of me, and I would be, I would be shocked if that there wasn't something in there in the municipal code that we would also try to encourage our businesses and private businesses in the community to ensure the utmost safety of anyone entering those properties and working on those properties. And so I struggle because I can make the findings that are presented to us here. I think this additional condition is satisfactory. I do think that there's language built into this draft resolution already, that requires everyone to be in compliant with state and federal and local laws. Again, I'm just really concerned. We do have an index of facilities, of rooftop cell facilities in the city. Obviously, it has never been presented to us tonight that there have been issues with those. So I believe that our city has done their due diligence in ensuring the operational and occupational safety of those sites, and I assume that will continue here. So I'm comfortable with moving tonight's item with this language, with the one caveat that, if it's amenable to the commission to add language that could be dropped off, that would just ensure further understanding and analysis of other potential signage requirements. Because again, my biggest chief concern is that, we live in a
We are ready to return from recess. At this time, staff is going to put a draft of the proposed resolution up on screen. And Travis, would you be the one who would
Sure.
read it? Okay.
So at the direction of the commission, staff